the cold hits you first. Not as weather, as a wall. You step out of the shelter, and the wind pulls the warmth from your skin, the way water drains from a cracked cup. Fast, and without mercy. Your breath freezes on the edge of your hood before it finishes leaving your mouth. This is morning. This is every morning. For tens of thousands of years, your ancestors lived through what we call the last ice age, a stretch of deep planetary cold when glaciers crawled south across Europe and Asia, and the world they knew was made of frost, bone, and hunger. You think you would have managed. You think you are tough. You are reading this in a heated room with food a few steps away, having never once worried that the temperature outside might kill you before sundown. So let's be honest about something. You wouldn't last a day, not because you are weak, because the skills that kept those people alive took a lifetime to build, and you were never taught a single one of them. Let's walk through that day and find out exactly where you would die. Start with the cold itself. The temperature on the open steppe, the vast cold grassland that stretched across Ice Age Eurasia, could fall far below freezing for months at a time. Exposed skin in that air doesn't just feel bad, it dies. Frostbite begins quietly, with numbness and ends with blackened fingers and toes that simply stop being yours. Your ancestors survived this because they were dressed for it, not in animal skins draped loosely over the shoulders, the way old cartoons imagine, in tailored, fitted, sewn clothing. The archaeologist Olga Soffer spent years studying impressions left in fired clay at a site called Dolní Věstonice, in what is now the Czech Republic. Pressed into that ancient clay, she found the weave of textiles, woven plant fibers, made roughly 27,000 years ago. These people had cordage, netting, and the technology to make close-fitting garments. They had bone needles with eyes drilled through them, fine enough to stitch layered, insulated clothing that trapped body heat against the skin. Could you make a needle out of bone? Could you tan a hide so it stays soft? Instead of freezing into a board, could you sew a seam tight enough to keep the wind out at 30 below? You couldn't. And so, on the open steppe, you would begin to lose heat the moment you stepped outside. But let's say you found a shelter. Let's say someone took pity on you. Now, you have to eat. This is where most people imagine the easy part. Hunting looks simple in your head. You find an animal, you throw a spear, you win. The animals of the Ice Age did not cooperate with that fantasy. The steppe was home to woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant deer, bison, and horses, all of them larger, faster, or far more dangerous than anything you have ever stood near. A cornered mammoth was a wall of muscle and tusk. That could end you in a single motion. A horse herd could be gone over the horizon before you finished deciding to run. So your ancestors did not rely on strength. They relied on the most powerful weapon any human has ever carried, a plan. Hunting on the Ice Age steppe was a coordinated, intelligent, deeply social act. It meant reading tracks in frozen ground. It meant knowing where a herd would move, days before it moved there. It meant driving animals toward cliffs, into bogs, into ambushes set by people who had done this 1,000 times. The weapons themselves were not simple sticks. They used the spear thrower, a carved length of bone or antler that acts as a lever for the throwing arm, roughly doubling the speed and distance a spear can travel. It turned a person of ordinary strength into something far more lethal. Hand someone today a spear, thrower with no instruction, and watch what happens. The spear flops. It wobbles. It lands at their feet. The tool is useless without the years of practiced motion behind it. Now picture yourself alone, untrained, trying to bring down a horse on open ground with a weapon you don't know how to hold. You see the problem. But here is where the story turns, because there is a danger far quieter than the mammoth and would likely kill you long before any animal did. You would eat the wrong thing. This sounds absurd. You found food. You ate it. How could that be deadly? But the Ice Age diet contained a trap that modern people stumble straight into. The anthropologist John Speth has written for decades about a problem he calls, plainly, the fat shortage. In a frozen world with almost no plants for months on end, lean meat alone is not enough to keep you alive. Your body cannot run on protein by itself. Burning protein for energy floods your system with byproducts your liver and kidneys cannot fully clear. This condition has a name. It was documented in detail by the Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson, who lived among Inuit communities in the early 20th century and saw it firsthand. The old trappers called it rabbit starvation. A person could eat lean meat all day, eat until their stomach was full, and still slowly starve, growing weak, sick, and finally dying because the meat had almost no fat in it. So your ancestors did not just hunt for meat, they hunted for fat. They prized the fatty organs, the marrow inside the bones, the layered tissue around the gut. They cracked long bones open and scraped out the rich grease inside. They knew, without any textbook, that fat was not a luxury. Fat was life. Would you have known that? Standing over a fresh kill, freezing and exhausted, would you have known to crack the bones and eat the grease, instead of just carving off the lean muscle and feeling proud of your meal? Almost certainly not. And so you would eat and feel full and weaken anyway. Now, let's reconstruct one full day. You wake before light in a shelter built partly from mammoth bones. Like the famous huts found at Mezhyrich in Ukraine, structures framed from dozens of curved mammoth tusks and jaws, a sign of just how much these people understood about engineering with the materials around them. The fire is low. Someone older has been awake for hours, working hide with a stone scraper, hands moving in a rhythm learned in childhood. You are handed a tool and expected to know what to do with it. You don't. The group moves out to track a horse herd spotted the day before. They read the snow. You see only snow. They move in silence, spreading into positions that have no meaning to you, communicating with small gestures you cannot interpret. When the moment comes, it comes fast, and it is over before you understand it has begun. The kill is made by people working as a single organism. You are a spare part. Back at the shelter, the work is endless. Butchering, rendering fat, treating hide before it stiffens, repairing clothing by firelight with bone needles. Every single task is a craft that takes years to master, and the cold does not pause to let you learn. And then comes the counterintuitive part, the thing that overturns the whole picture in your head. These were not desperate, grunting brutes barely clinging to life. They were among the most skilled, capable, and intelligent humans who have ever lived. Consider the burial site at Sungir in Russia dating to roughly 34,000 years ago. Archaeologists found graves so elaborate they are almost hard to believe. Bodies covered in thousands of beads carved from mammoth ivory, each bead representing about an hour of skilled labor. Spears made from straightened mammoth tusks, a feat of craft we still don't fully understand. These people had art, ceremony, deep social bonds, and a command of their world so total that they could afford to spend countless hours making something beautiful. For the dead, that is not survival on the edge. That is mastery. The reason they could create beauty is that the hard skills of staying alive were so deeply ingrained that they had time and energy left over for meaning. You have it backwards. You think they were primitive and you are advanced. But drop them in your world and within a week, they would adapt. Drop you in theirs, and you would be gone by nightfall. So why does this matter to you, sitting where you are right now? Because it reveals something about what you actually are. You are not a self-sufficient individual. You never were. Everything you depend on to stay alive, of the heat, the food, the clothing, the safety, was made by other people using knowledge passed down and divided across thousands of hands. You did not earn your survival. You inherited a system. Those Ice Age hunters knew this in their bones. Survival was never one person against the cold. It was a group, a shared body of knowledge, a web of people who each held a piece of the whole. The lone hunter is a myth. The real story was always the tribe. Look up from this screen for a moment. The warmth around you, the food within reach, the fact that you have never once feared the morning, none of it is yours alone. It is the same gift those people protected with everything they had, handed forward across 30,000 years to you. The cold is still out there. It always was. The only thing that ever held it back was each other.